I'm joined by Paul Morrison, Policy Advisor on Poverty and Inequality for the Methodist Church. And we're talking today, Paul, about credit scores, which might not sound like it fits necessarily into that category, but this could affect people on the housing ladder or trying to get onto the housing ladder, people trying to get mortgages and all sorts of other sorts of loans. The agency Experian has said it will factor in things like rental payments, mobile phone contracts, also reducing overdrafts when it comes to compiling credit scores. What are your thoughts on how this could impact people, particularly those who are struggling to get onto the housing ladder?
Well, if you get into any form of financial difficulty, the advice is always to ensure you make payments on the things that keep a roof over your head. That's the priority. Obviously, get proper advice on all of these things, but key is keeping a roof over your head. And previously, some rather unscrupulous people who are trying to collect their debts would say things like, but your credit score will be, if you don't pay my debt, your credit score will be damaged, which is both true, but really bad advice. So now the idea that paying your rent and heeding that advice isn't going to count against you is a great thing. And I think that's grand. But frankly, housing ownership, especially amongst young people, has been going down and down. It's dropped by 20% over the last 20 years. It isn't because of credit scores, and it isn't because, loans aren't well targeted because of bad credit score agencies. This may help the loans be targeted slightly better. It's because prices have just got too high. And no amount of tweaking of credit scores is going to change that fundamental. And there's a real question now about how we provide housing to people who don't have a lot of money. And it's something I see in my work around poverty and inequality all the time. Just yesterday, I was talking to a group in Huddersfield, and you have people who are working decent jobs. They're at the lower end of the pay scale, and it is housing that is driving them into poverty. It is housing that is meaning they cannot do the things they want and they can't progress. So it's a very long way of saying it's a minor improvement, but the fundamental problem needs to be wrestled with, and that's what we're seeing.
All successive governments have spoken about their desire to have more people able to own their own home rather than renting. And yet other countries around the world have much higher proportions of people renting, even up to retirement, than we do. Why is it so difficult for people who are renting in the UK?
Well, housing markets evolve over generations, and there's a culture in different places, especially around Europe. There's some very different sort of rental rates. But the thing that is really important, if you have a society in which you say actually renting is going to be how you live the majority of your life, then you have to provide people with stability and protection in the rental market. You have to say that this is your home. You can, raise your children here. They can settle in a local school, and you don't have to move. Because our rental market is much more fluid than that, because we assume that stability comes when you buy a house, it means that the rights of renters are relatively much lower in the UK. So if we are moving to a society which says renting is the way in which you live your life, then you have to also move to a society that says that for people to flourish, they have to have the rights to stay in there. And when they go through some financial trouble and maybe can't make a few rent payments, landlords have to show forbearance, and many do, but the law doesn't require them to particularly, or in the same way as they do in other countries. So yes, these are different ways of arranging it, but the fundamental of housing is that it should be a place where people can live and thrive and raise families and do all the things that you want to do in a home. And if you do it via rental, then you need one set of rules. If you do it via buying, then you need to make buying affordable, and you need to make it offer you need to make it more available to a wider range of people. We seem to be stuck in this moment where we regulate as if the only way to have a stable housing is by owning. But for a whole generation of people coming through, they are never, or they do not foresee themselves owning a property. And so they're stuck in this cycle of insecurity of different landlords, of wondering whether or not they'll be able to stay for the next few years. And for churches and around London, especially, I've heard from a number of people that one of the things that sort of frustrates them is you have children coming in, you set up a Sunday school, you think I've got a good community going here, but actually they have to move on to a different borough in a different place. And you never get to build that relationship and build that continuity that churches want to have with people, because we're essentially a relational organisation.
When we look then at the cost of renting and the cost of housing, do you think it's problematic the way the public views that? Because whenever anything happens that might cause house prices to drop, it's inevitably reported as a really bad thing for society.
In some ways it is. And we've caught ourselves in this trap because lots of people who own their houses, they don't own them. The bank owns a large amount of them in a mortgage. And for them, if the value of the house goes below the value of the loan, then they're in real trouble and they're stuck and they can't move. And it's a big worry. So there is no simple policy way out. If there was, that it would have been done a number of years ago. But from a perspective of the church, we want to see that houses are recognised not as a financial asset, but as a place for people to live and thrive and build community. And when you recognise that, you start making slightly different decisions about how we view the rise and fall of the property market and how we view how we view the regulation of rents and the ability to let people stay in their house for longer periods of time. So what's required is a change of mindset from houses being something you make money out of to houses being something that families live and thrive in.
Well, just finally, picking up on the role of the church in this and the wider discussion around all sorts of policy areas impacting poverty and inequality, is it important that we don't become a bit hopeless or cynical about all of this by reflecting on the changes that have been made in society in modern times that Christians have been involved in actually spearheading?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I've been involved in some research looking at what people, believe is happening in our country. And there's a feeling of despondency about the place. And lots of people are reflecting that back to the researchers. But when I look at the problems we have, they're all solvable. They are all solvable if we choose to do so. And they are solvable if we choose to work together and if we choose to build communities. And I've been studying in my personal life things around the image of God, and there's this really lovely theology around the image of God, that God is these three persons always in relationship, and this relational idea that if we work together, if we form good relationships around us as individuals and as institutions in society, then actually we can start to reflect more of who God is and start to make improvements for everyone. And it feels there is despondency, but actually we have come out of so much worse than this. And I truly believe God has better plans for us than things going downhill.
Paul Morrison from the Methodist Church, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.